Usually, when we look at a map of the United States, there's this expectation of, I don't know, order. Like you have the crisp, straight lines of Colorado, the familiar curves of the coastlines, and it all just sits there. It's static, comforting,
Right, yeah.
doesn't move.
Exactly. But today, and by the way, welcome to today's deep dive. It's Thursday, August 6, 2026, and we are looking at the latest wildfire report from the Daily Tech Reader. But anyway, when you look at the reality on the ground today, that neat, orderly map is just aggressively erasing its own state lines.
Oh, absolutely. It's a completely boundaryless crisis right now.
Because right now, the entire country is sitting at what they call preparedness level 5, which is, a very bureaucratic term that actually means the American wildland firefighting system is stretched to its absolute breaking point.
It really is. I mean, the data we're looking at paints a picture of this massive interconnected ecosystem that is just under severe, severe stress. We are way beyond a localized issue here. Okay, let's unpack this. Preparedness level 5. We've been hovering at this level for a bit, but mathematically speaking, what actually happens to the logistics chain when we stay at maximum capacity without a break? Like, what does level 5 actually look like on the ground today?
So it looks like a triage system with zero reserve capacity, none. When we hit level 5, it means we have hundreds of active wildfires burning simultaneously across the country. And dozens of those are large, uncontained incidents.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah, and the report makes it very clear that resource availability remains tight nationwide. So in practical terms, that means you have crews coming off a grueling, 2-week rotation on a megafire, and instead of getting to reset and rest, the system just desperately needs them somewhere else immediately.
Because the sheer volume of fire is just totally outpacing the heavy equipment, the aircraft, the personnel.
Right. Every single piece on the chessboard is currently in play. There are no reinforcements coming over the hill.
And the pressure isn't static, right? Because the report shows that under these conditions, new large fires are igniting daily.
Exactly. You're adding to the problem every 24 hours, but the solution remains completely capped. You can't just manufacture more elite hotshot crews overnight.
Wow. Which I guess brings us to the epicenter of all of this. Because while the whole West is locked in this level 5 reality, the data points to the Pacific Northwest doing the heavy lifting right now. I mean, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho are currently hosting more than half of all large fires in the entire country.
Yeah, over 50% of the nation's major incidents are concentrated in just that one corner of the map. It's staggering.
So if you think of Oregon and Washington as the massive engine of this current crisis, what is the fuel driving these extreme conditions? Because looking at these humidity numbers, it's not just about dry wood anymore, is it?
No, and that is a critical distinction to make. The fuel isn't just the timber and the brush, it's the atmosphere itself.
The atmosphere.
Yeah, the report highlights critically low minimum humidity, plummeting into the teens and, in many places, straight into the single digits.
Single-digit humidity. I mean, mechanically speaking, how does 8% humidity physically change a landscape?
Well, think of it like a kiln. We normally think of living trees and green shrubs as resistant to fire, because they hold moisture.
Right.
But when you subject an environment to persistent heat and single-digit humidity, the atmosphere literally acts like a sponge. It aggressively sucks the moisture out of living vegetation, so it fundamentally changes the cellular structure of the plants.
Wait, really? It alters them that much?
Yes, they stop being living ecosystems and effectively become, kiln-dried kindling.
Oh, wow. So a spark that might normally just smolder in a patch of green grass suddenly has the potential to sprint.
Precisely. It supports rapid fire spread and just explosive new ignitions.
Let's look closely at Oregon then, because the data flags it as the nation's undisputed wildfire epicenter right now. We're tracking extreme fire behavior across Malheur, Wheeler, Harney, and Baker counties.
Yeah, the eastern and central parts of the state are just getting hammered.
And it's not just remote rangelands either. You look at a city like Bend, sitting in the upper 80s, and it is completely socked in with heavy smoke. Down in Medford, it's hitting the low 90s with this persistent haze. And here is the mechanism that keeps appearing in the data breezy afternoon winds.
Ah, yeah. Those afternoon winds are basically the mechanical bellows driving this engine. And they aren't random. They're a very predictable physical reaction.
How so?
Well, the summer sun bakes the valleys and the slopes, right? That hot air rises rapidly, and then cooler air just rushes in to fill the vacuum.
So you have a fire that might be, I don't know, somewhat manageable or creeping along in the cooler morning hours, and then the atmosphere effectively switches on a massive fan by 3 p.m.
Right. And you take that wind, you combine it with the kiln-dried fuels we just talked about, and you get exponential fire growth.
And obviously that dynamic doesn't just politely stop at the state line. Moving north into Washington, there are numerous active fires, particularly a cluster of large incidents east of the Cascades.
Yeah, the Columbia Basin and Okanogan County are just blanketed in heavy smoke right now.
Exactly. Spokane is sitting in the mid-80s, but the visibility is dropping rapidly. Same story in Wenatchee and Yakima, upper 80s, dry, hazy, and getting hammered by those exact same afternoon winds.
And then, you add Idaho to complete the Pacific Northwest Triangle.
Right.
Idaho has multiple active fires, but the variable that changes the equation there is the geography. The report really emphasizes that these incidents are burning in incredibly rugged terrain.
Wait, I want to pause on that because I think a lot of people, myself included, picture a wildfire as something you just, drive a bulldozer up to and dig a line around.
Yeah.
How does rugged terrain physically change the containment strategy?
It basically takes away your ground game entirely. In sheer, steep terrain, you physically cannot get heavy equipment in. And putting hand crews on a steep slope above or below a fire is a massive safety risk. Fire runs uphill incredibly fast because it preheats the fuel above it. So in Idaho, you can't rely on bulldozers or boots on the ground in the same way. You have to rely heavily on aerial support.
Like helicopters and air tankers dropping water and retardant.
Exactly.
But here's the paradox I'm seeing in the data. If Idaho is totally reliant on aerial support to fight fires in rugged terrain, how do they fly when the smoke from their own fires and the massive fires in Oregon is completely choking out the region? I mean, the metrics show heavy smoke impacts across Boise, Lewiston, and the Clearwater Basin. Boise's in the low 90s and just smothered in it.
You've hit on one of the most frustrating feedback loops in wildland firefighting. Aircraft require a minimum visibility threshold to operate safely, right? Especially when they're diving to deep canyons.
Sure, that makes sense.
But when massive fires produce enough smoke, it can create an inversion layer that traps that smoke in the valleys. So the smoke produced by the fire in that rugged terrain actually grounds the air support needed to fight it.
Wow. So they are literally blinded by the byproduct of the very thing they're trying to stop.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
If we step back from this, we have millions of tons of smoke being generated, effectively blinding aerial support. And if we can't fight it from the air, and it's too rugged for the ground, that fire just keeps burning and generating more smoke.
Which perfectly illustrates the next major phenomenon we need to look at. Because all that smoke has to go somewhere.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting. If you were listening to this right now and you live in a state without a massive, uncontained fire, you might be looking at the map thinking you are in the clear.
You're definitely not.
Right. Because fire doesn't respect state lines, and it is aggressively exporting its problem across the country. Let's trace this interstate smoke pipeline based on the trajectories in the report. Where exactly is this going?
Well, we have to view the regional weather systems as massive atmospheric conveyor belts. Let's start with Oregon's large plumes. The prevailing weather patterns are pushing that smoke directly east into Idaho, which, like we said, is compounding their local inversion problems.
Yep.
But it's also pushing north into Washington and drifting south, creating severe air quality degradation for Northern California.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers out of Northern California, Redding is baking in the upper 90s, completely dry and just choked with out-of-state smoke.
Right.
Chico is in the mid-90s with haze, and that smoke is creeping all the way down into the Sacramento Valley.
And that's just the West Coast.
Right. What about the eastward trajectory? Because I always sort of assumed the Rockies acted like a physical wall against West Coast weather patterns.
Well, the surface winds might get blocked, sure, but the high-altitude transport winds carry these massive smoke columns right over the peaks. The plume moving east from Oregon and Idaho completely jumps the border into Montana. Yeah, the data shows heavy smoke drifting into western Montana, severely impacting visibility in Missoula and Helena. Both cities are sitting in the mid to upper 80s, bone dry, and dealing with this massive breathing hazard that originated hundreds of miles away.
And the pipeline just keeps going. That combined Idaho and Montana smoke travels further east into Wyoming, hitting places like Sheridan, which is in the mid-80s and smoky today. And then it hooks south into Colorado. You have Fort Collins and Greeley dealing with significant smoke and haze right now.
We are also tracking smoke from Idaho and Nevada, pushing down into Utah, which is degrading the air quality in Salt Lake City and Ogden. Salt Lake is in the low 90s right now, breezy and hazy from imported smoke.
It really forces you to reframe how you think about your local environment. You could be sitting at a cafe in Fort Collins, Colorado, breathing in the vaporized remnants of a pine tree that burned in Oregon 3 days ago.
It's a very sobering thought. We are deeply physically connected by these weather systems.
We really are.
But if we pivot from the smoke back to the actual fires, we have to look at the catalysts. If our resources are tapped out at level 5 and aircraft are grounded by smoke, how are we handling the new ignitions? Or, better yet, what is causing them?
That brings up a massive paradox in the report.
Yeah.
Usually when you look at a summer weather forecast, a thunderstorm sounds like a good thing for a fire, right? You think rain, relief, moisture.
Usually, yes.
But in this specific snapshot, thunderstorms are actually the enemy.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the meteorological phenomenon of dry thunderstorms or dry lightning. The report flags this as a primary critical threat across almost every single Western state right now.
Dry lightning. I mean, I've heard the term, but it sounds like an oxymoron. How do you get a thunderstorm without the water?
It's not that the storm doesn't have water, it's about what happens to the water before it reaches the ground.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about the static electricity analogy, like walking across a carpet in wool socks. The atmosphere is highly unstable, hot air is rising rapidly, rubbing together and building up a massive electrical charge in these towering thunderclouds.
Okay, so the storm generates the charge, the lightning strikes occur, and it does rain high up in the atmosphere.
Yes, the rain falls, but remember that single-digit humidity and intense heat we talked about at the surface?
The cumulative effect.
Exactly. The lower atmosphere is essentially a massive dry oven. So as the rain falls through that oven, it simply evaporates midair. It literally never touches the ground.
Oh, wow. So you get the massive electrical strike, the ignition source slamming into the earth, but absolutely none of the moisture follows to put it out.
Right. It is nature's perfect fire-starting mechanism. It is basically a barrage of lit matches dropping directly onto those kiln-dried fuels we discussed earlier.
And looking at the map, this isn't an isolated risk at all. The report is calling out elevated lightning potential in central Oregon, in northern and central Washington, where unstable air is likely to trigger new ignitions, and in northern California, specifically around Grass Valley.
And it sweeps right across the interior west, too. Central Idaho is facing increasing lightning potential. Montana and Wyoming have severe lightning concerns as atmospheric instability increases through the afternoon.
It's everywhere.
It is. The threat stretches down into Nevada, Utah, the Colorado mountains, and all the way through eastern Arizona and New Mexico.
So almost the entire western half of the United States is basically waiting for dry lightning to strike today. And then you combine that lightning with the other mechanism we talked about, those afternoon winds.
Yes, because when a dry thunderstorm builds, it eventually collapses, and when it does, it sends massive downdrafts of erratic wind rushing out in all directions.
So it's not just dropping the match, it's blowing on it immediately after.
Exactly. And the report explicitly warns about these winds complicating things in almost every state. Like in Nevada, it's hot across the Great Basin, Reno is in the low 90s, and they are deeply concerned about rapid fire spread in those open range lands as the afternoon winds pick up.
Same thing in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
Winds are increasing along the Front Range and the western slope, raising serious concerns for foothill terrain around Denver and Grand Junction.
Yeah, the wind is just a massive multiplier for all of this.
Okay, so we've mapped the epicenter in the northwest, we've traced the interstate smoke pipeline, and we've broken down the mechanics of dry lightning. We need to zoom out and look at the outliers, starting with a state that is usually completely synonymous with massive apocalyptic wildfires, California.
The data coming out of California in this report is actually quite revealing because it represents this very precarious balancing act.
It really does. I'm looking at the metrics for California, and it has all the ingredients of a disaster. The Central Valley and the Sierra foothills are baking in extreme heat. They have dozens of active fires. But surprisingly, the large fire activity is actually lower in California right now than it is in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, it's unusual.
They seem to be dodging the massive mega fires at this exact moment. Why is that?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's basically a game of atmospheric roulette. And right now, California just hasn't caught the critical alignment of ignition and wind on a massive scale. But the underlying conditions are identical, if not worse, than the Northwest.
Right, because Northern California is sitting under active red flag warnings as we speak.
Precisely. The humidity in some inland areas has dropped into the single digits. So while they might not have a 100,000-acre complex burning today, the landscape is critically primed. Every single one of those dozens of small active fires has the potential to explode if the wind shifts or, if they get a bad round of that dry lightning we just talked about.
They are essentially a sleeping giant. And it's not just California sitting on a knife's edge, it's the broader Southwest, too. Down in Arizona, hot and dry conditions are completely dominating. Tucson is baking in the upper 90s. And they already have multiple active fires in northern Arizona that are pushing smoke down into Flagstaff and Prescott.
We see a very similar pattern in New Mexico, numerous active fires, but like California, the report notes most of them remain small right now.
But the danger metrics are incredibly high. Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Gallup, they're all dealing with mid to upper 80s, haze, smoke importing from Arizona, and those breezy winds combined with low humidity.
Which brings us right back to the core tension of this entire report. These states, California, Arizona, New Mexico, they have the heat, they have the critically dry fuels, they have the dry thunderstorm risks, and they are sitting on dozens of small active fires.
They're only missing the one specific spark that turns a small fire into an unfightable megafire.
Exactly.
So, what does this all mean? If you step back and look at the entire board, no matter where you are in the American West right now, you are part of a deeply interconnected ecosystem. A fire that starts in the sheer cliffs of Idaho becomes a breathing hazard for a family in Colorado. A dry thunderstorm in Utah stretches our national firefighting logistics even thinner. We are all sharing the exact same air, the same weather systems, and the exact same risks.
And that interconnectedness leads us to a very, very chilling mathematical reality. If we look at the two defining facts of this report side by side.
Right, the fact that resource availability remains tight nationwide, and the fact that new large fires continue to ignite daily.
Exactly. We are trapped at preparedness level 5. The denominator, our national firefighting capacity, is fixed, and it is entirely maxed out fighting the epicenter in the Pacific Northwest. But the numerator, the number of fires, is growing every single day.
Wow. So the terrifying question isn't just about what's burning now. It's about what happens to those dozens of small fires currently burning in places like California and New Mexico when the daily barrage of dry lightning strikes and there's literally no one left to call.
Yeah. If the engine of the Northwest is using 100% of the resources, what happens when the sleeping giant in California finally wakes up?
It really makes you rethink those neat static lines on the map. The map isn't a filing cabinet. Right now, it is a single breathing organism, and the whole system is under extreme interconnected stress.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Daily Tech Reader's Wildfire Report. Stay safe out there, stay informed, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.